Good evening, everyone. It is just about 4:50 in the morning on August 23rd, 2019. A couple of things. The video has changed a little bit to be a bit more helpful. At the bottom of the video, you should see a progress bar, and you should also see a little text next to where you can click and to forward to the point where you can go to certain sections of the video. I hope that this is somewhat more helpful than just putting in links in the comments and in the description, and that it actually works out fairly well on YouTube. Let's get into it. We have today the actual comparison between the Cobalt and the Mojo. Now, you may say to yourselves, these two devices can in no way compete with each other. You're talking about a USB stick versus the Chord Mojo, the world's most bestest audio unit ever. Boy, it doesn't help when you just wake up and you've only had about 3 sips of coffee, huh? Today's video is not going to be about the sound as much as it is practicality. Is it even practical to compare these two devices? A Chord Mojo versus a USB DAC? Come on. That's what we're going to answer, the come on part. We're going to talk about the power requirements, how much power they output. We're going to talk about their soundstage, and then I'm going to give you a conclusion regarding whether or not the Cobalt can ever compete with the Mojo being a USB DAC. Let's get into it, shall we? So let's talk about the power requirement. And what I have here is the Allo Audio S4R. That's the headphones we're going to use. Those are the headphones. It is the headphone we are going to use for this test for a number of reasons. Reason number one, it's an extremely flat response rate. We've already touched on this. Reason number two, it's only 32 ohms, so it is exceptionally easy to drive. So the impedance on the headphones will not be the deciding factor on which one provides, which of these units, Cobalt or Mojo, provides more power. That's our standard here. But how do we get to the power? It's not as easy as you might think. You may say, just go to the manufacturer's website and they'll tell you what the output power is. Yes and no, and mostly no. If we go to the Chord Mojo website, here's Mojo, it looks so nice. You go down to the specifications, and the specifications say output power 8 ohms, 720 milliwatts. Output power 600 ohms, 35 milliwatts. What about the rest in between? Well, Chord says go jump off a bridge. We ain't telling you. We have to estimate, and my estimation is that at 32 ohms, you can probably expect around 500 milliwatts. That's just a basic estimation based upon my usage and my experiences with other amplifiers and DACs. There might be somebody out there who has an actual concrete number that they have experimented with. If so, let me know. Otherwise, we're just going to go with the estimate of 500 milliwatts. What about the Cobalt? Well, things get even worse there. The Cobalt has no real numbers for power output, how much they can drive. Instead, AudioQuest website simply says output voltage 2.1. See that? Output voltage 2.1. Well, that's not particularly helpful when you're trying to figure out what impedance headphones these things max out to. And I checked and I couldn't find anything on their website. Is it possible it's somewhere in their marketing material? Maybe. I don't know. But there is a way around this little conundrum. We know for a fact that this is a USB stick. Duh, I said it several times. But we also know that you can actually calculate the power output from a USB port. I'm not an engineer of any sort. I can barely open a box if you've ever seen one of my unboxings. So instead, we're going to Wikipedia. Wikipedia does in fact have a listing of power outputs for different types of USB ports. I'll read to you regarding low power and high power devices. I'm quoting, low power devices such as a typical USB keyboard may draw at most 1 unit load. 1 unit load is 100 milliamps, not milliwatts, milliamps. For USB devices up to USB 2.0, while USB 3.0 defines a unit load as 150 milliamps. And all devices act as low power devices when starting out as unconfigured. High-power devices, such as a typical 2.5-inch USB hard drive, draw at least one unit load and at most 5 unit loads, which is 500 milliamps, right? At USB 2.0, you have 100, and then 5 times that is 500. For devices up to USB 2.0, or 6 unit loads or 900 milliamps for super speed devices. Now, super speed devices, we're talking about USB 3.0. The Wikipedia page also has this USB power standards chart, which gets current, voltage, and then power output. What we have here is a basic breakdown of how much power output you could theoretically expect. Now, that changes depending on your USB port, the manufacturer of your motherboard, and whether or not the USB port was manufactured to provide greater voltage or lesser voltage. It's hard to say. And this is simply a kind of roundabout way of saying this is as much as you can probably realistically expect. Now, USB ports typically provide about 5 volts of power, right? But there are some power delivery methods that provide more. There are some that provide about 20 volts of power. But my computer doesn't provide 20 volts of power through a USB port. It maxes out at 5 volts. So low power, which is USB 2.0, you get 0.50 watts. That's the peak that you can expect. What is 0.50 watts? Well, 0.50 watts is 500 milliwatts. The USB 3.0, just standard USB 3.0, is 0.75 watts or 750 milliwatts. Now, according to Wikipedia, you can have up to 5 units from one given USB port itself, one wire, or 9 units on USB 3.0. So you could expect, instead of 100 milliamps, you can expect 500 milliamps. And so you multiply that by 5. And for USB 3 is 150 milliamps, which would be ratcheted up to 6 units, which is 900 milliamps. So you multiply that by 6. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that these units, the Cobalt, for example, is going to draw 9 units of load. I'm going to pretend that it's going to draw 1 unit of load because there's no way for me to actually measure it. I think 1 unit of load is sufficient, especially since if you realize it's 500 milliwatts or 750 milliwatts if you're using 3.0. I hope that makes a little bit of sense because, quite frankly, I am no electrical engineer, and this is all guesswork, especially since neither manufacturer really provides the true numbers, especially here, AudioQuest. Let's move on to the Soundstage. Now, the Soundstage is a hard thing to talk about because Soundstage between DACs is not as easily discernible as Soundstage differences between headphones because there's going to be a greater variance with headphones than there is going to be with DACs, generally speaking. But let's try to figure out if there is greater Soundstage in one device or another, if at all possible. I currently have the Mojo selected. It is plugged into my AB switch, and we are going to start off with New Light by Kazuki. This has a lot of layers. It gives you the impression that you're out in an open field. That's the idea. Let's see if we get that type of sensation. Here we go. Currently, the volume is at 2 oranges, increasing volume to 2 greens. And I want to make sure that my volume here is maxed out. It's 100% volume. And max out volume on Spotify. Bringing back the volume down to 2 oranges. I can hear the kids in the background, but they're kind of muffled. I could hear the footsteps, but it's not really a crunching sound. So the footsteps on the grass doesn't create a crunching sound. The guitar has a very personal presence to it, very closed off presence, like you're sitting right next to the guitarist as he's strumming. I hear the wind, but it sounds pretty muffled. Almost like I'm listening to this song inside my bedroom. The door is closed, and the song is being played on really nice speakers. It's just that it doesn't sound open and airy. The sound seems to be coming in into the sides, no verticality. It doesn't feel like I'm floating inside the sound, like the sound is all over my head. Okay, so let's switch to the Cobalt. Okay, now we're on the Cobalt. Volume currently on the Cobalt is 24% for master volume because there's no other way for me to select it. Let's start this song again, shall we? And at 25%, the volume is just about the same as on the Mojo, a percent here or there. The kids are easily more discernible. The footsteps have much more crunch to them. So when the person steps down on the grass, I can hear the actual crunching of the grass underneath the foot. The air is, well, it's not heavy sounding. It's not claustrophobic feeling. The whole mix has much more air around it. The guitar is thinner compared to the Mojo, meaning the guitar frequency doesn't become overpowering to the kids playing in the background or to the footsteps. Everything is well separated. I don't feel that there's more verticality with the Cobalt versus the Mojo, nor do I feel as if that the Cobalt is producing sound all around my ear. But of course, like I said at the beginning, that's more of a headphone thing than it is a DAC or an amplifier thing. So from this song, I could say that the real issue is the Cobalt provides a leaner, airier presentation. And by lean, I don't mean that you don't get detail. That's not what I mean. I mean, the Mojo is simply a gushy, gooey, thick, syrupy sound, whereas the Cobalt is not. Great separation from the Cobalt, better than the Mojo with the details. The precision of the crunching of the grass underneath the person's feet, I assume he has more than one, is by no measure a minute difference. It is a significant difference, in my opinion. The Mojo simply muffles it to a degree that I don't like, whereas the Cobalt simply provides that detail. Let's go to Flight from the City by Johan Johansson. I currently have the Cobalt plugged in at 25% volume. Here we go. The piano sounds like I'm in a medium-sized room or larger, and I'm sitting probably 5 or 6 rows back, and it's airy. The piano frequency, there's a fast decay. It doesn't sound muddied, muffled in any way. Good left and right soundstage. I can hear this buzzing that goes from the right ear cup all the way to the left ear cup. I can hear the minute details of the person leaning in and out of his piano chair, bench. I think it's called a bench. Actually, it's separation of instruments. Once again, it doesn't sound like there's verticality or anything like that, but that's more of a headphone thing than it is a DAC amplifier thing. Let's switch to the Chord Mojo. Okay, now we're on the Mojo, and let's play the song again. Volume is set at double orange, which is, to my ears, the same as 25% on the Cobalt. The piano sounds thicker, more closed off, and instead of being in a medium-sized room, 5 or 6 rows back, I feel as if we are in a small room and we are just gathered around this piano. It sounds very intimate and warm and inviting. It simply doesn't have the air. So you're missing out on some of that detail that comes from the airiness, not just from the Cobalt, from any other DAC amplifier that has more air in it. It's not emphasized in the lower regencies. There's good separation. It's just that the piano frequency reverberates a little longer than it did on the Cobalt, and that starts to meld into the frequencies of the cello. You can clearly hear the difference between the two, but you can't, you don't hear the clear hard stop of the piano frequency and the hard start of the cello. As far as Soundstage is concerned, there's good left and right. The only issue I would point out is that because it's such a warm DAC, that left to right is not as obvious as it is on the Cobalt on this song. It's still there. I mean, there's clearly Soundstage here. It's simply a narrowed soundstage, and with the more muffled sound signature of the Mojo, it might present itself as having less soundstage, although it probably does not. I think it has this equal amount of soundstage as the Cobalt. Let's try one more regarding the soundstage, and let's go to The Big Ship by Brian Eno. I currently have the Mojo plugged in. Here we go. Starts off with a... what is this? I don't know what instrument this is, but it's a nice instrument. And then there's this, what is it? The clacker thingies. A maracha? Is it a maracha? Listen to this song. Tell me what it is. It builds up slowly from the background and brings it up into the middle of the mix. And that first instrument that came in is still prevalent. That's probably ahead of everything else right now. And there's good soundstage. What just happened about 2-3 seconds ago is that the first instrument, there was a shift, a slight shift from left ear cup to right and then back to the left, as if somebody was panning the camera and then came back to dead center. It was a nice little effect. It sounds closed, intimate, soft, soothing. Let's switch to the Cobalt and see how it performs. Okay, we're back on the Cobalt. Here we go. Immediately notice there's more air. That instrument, that primary instrument, has a quicker reverberation than it did with the Mojo. Builds up. And now that it's building up, I can tell you that it sounds leaner building up than it did on the Mojo, meaning not as much emphasis behind it. The maracha instrument, instead of being midway in the frequency, is closer to the front. And now the primary instrument, the first instrument, has overtaken it and has gotten ahead. Demonstrably more air between the Cobalt and the Mojo. It sounds wider to me, almost like there's an additional 3 or 4 feet on either side of me. And it's still doing that panning thing where I can feel the pan just to left and right a little bit every once in a while. I would say that was a bit more prevalent on the Mojo than it was on the Cobalt. And my speculation is that that frequency is so thick on the Mojo, the first instrument. It sounds so much thicker that when it pans, it's more obvious on the Mojo than it is on the Cobalt. But the Cobalt does present it simply in a leaner way. Okay, so that is Soundstage. Let's talk about volume. How about volume? How do you compare volume between these two? You've got a dedicated amplifier DAC like the Mojo, and then you have a USB stick. Come on, how could you possibly compare the two? Oh, my friends, there is an answer. Let's go to, look, if we're going to pump volume, we should pump volume on a song that's going to pump us up. We're going to go to Pure Water with Migos, Mustard and Migos. Mustard, mustard. We're going to listen to Mustard. We're going to listen to Pure Water. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pick one. So we're going to start off with whatever we're on right now. What are we on? I think we're on the Mojo. My memory is so bad. We're on the Dragonfly. We're going to start with the Dragonfly, and I'm going to ratchet up the volume using master volume until I get to the point where I say this song is too loud for me. I cannot listen to it beyond this point, and we're going to note that number. Then we're going to play the song again on the Mojo and ratchet up the volume and see if we exceed that volume. Does that kind of make sense? Here we go on the Dragonfly. We are currently at 24%. Let's increase the volume to 30. Very comfortable. 40%. This is a very comfortable listening volume. If you have close back headphones, you probably wouldn't want to go any louder than this because you can barely hear anything else. And with open back headphones, you probably wouldn't want to go this loud. Increase to 50%. Now at 50%, it sounds like a pair of bookshelf speakers that you've cranked up to 75% essentially. It's very loud. 60%. This is as loud as I would feel comfortable listening to this song, but it's not at the threshold. Let's go to 70%. We're getting pretty close here. Let's go to 80%. Okay, this is probably my limit. So 80% is the volume where I would have to stop. That is exceptionally loud. That's probably 25% higher than I would ever listen to this song on the Olo. The reason being is that at 50%, wait, what's 80 minus 25? You know what I mean. Don't ask me questions like this at 5 o'clock in the morning. Around 50%, it's loud enough for me to just relax, listen to and work on my stuff and not worry about bothering other people around me. At 80% volume, you can probably expect a tap on the shoulder as your neighbor says, "Could you please turn that racket down? I'm not a fan of mustard." That's not bad. 80% volume, and it's really exceptionally loud, almost neighbor bothering loud in my opinion, on a USB DAC. Interesting, huh? How about we go to the Chord Mojo? Surely the Chord Mojo is going to outdo this diminutive DAC amp. Okay, we have that switched. Currently we are starting at double orange, and based upon my prior testing and today, double orange is basically 25% compared to the Cobalt. Okay, here we go. Start again. Now bear with me with the color schemes. We're starting at double orange. I'm going to increase now to double yellow. Very comfortable. I can hear things around me still. Increasing to 1 green, 1 yellow. Not a huge difference between that and the double yellow. Now we're at 2 teal. This is probably a comfortable volume I would listen to the headphone, comparable to about 50% on the Cobalt. I wouldn't want to listen to it any louder if I'm in a room with other people. Increasing volume to 2 light blue. This is close to the feeling of having your bookshelf speakers cranked up to about 75%. Very loud. Now we're at double blue, darker blue. Shades of blue. A lot like the book, Shades of Grey. Increasing volume to darker blue. Jesus, how many blues are there? Now we're getting to my threshold. Almost there. Increasing again to 1 purple, 1 blue, 1 light purple, 1 blue. Very loud. This is about the same volume as on the Cobalt at 80%. So 1 purple, 1 blue, and 2 purples is absolutely my threshold. So 2 purples, the first level of purpleness, it's light purple. That's where I would call the limit. That is exceptionally loud for these headphones. And although I would say that the Cobalt 80% is not exactly 2 light purples on the Mojo, it's very, very close. And in both circumstances, I would say I would not listen to this song at those volumes at all. Let's go to Scherzo for X-Wings because I really want to blow out my eardrums. And let's try the same experiment. I currently have the Mojo plugged in. Double orange, and we're going to increase to do 1 green, 1 yellow. Still comfortable. Now we're at 2 teals. This is probably comfortable listening volume for me on this song. Now we're at 2 sea blues. Bluish, less than blue. Now we're at 2 sky blues. And then we are at 2 dark blues. Now we're at 1 purple, 1 dark blue, 2 purples, light purples. And this is my threshold again. Because any further beyond this, and I think that the horns will get a little bit too ear-piercy for me to handle. So once again, 2 light purples is my limit. Let's switch to the Cobalt. Okay, now we're on the Cobalt, and let's try this again. We are currently at 25%. Fairly easy listening volume. Let's increase to 30%. Noticeable difference, but not huge. Let's increase again to 40%. 50%. And this is the volume I would probably feel comfortable listening to this song. I wouldn't listen to it any louder. But let's increase to 60%. The instruments are still well controlled. No ear pierciness yet. 70%. We're getting close. 80%. Very loud. Increase to 85%. Ooh, that's ear piercing. Too much volume. Bringing back down to 25%. Okay, so between 80 and 85% is where I hit the limit on this song. And frankly, it's probably 80%, and I was just at the different portion of the song than I was on the Mojo. That's not bad, right? You can get exceptionally loud volumes out of the Cobalt. It keeps pace with the Mojo. So let's talk about the conclusion between these two units regarding the power, the soundstage, the volume. The power here is hard to really discern because I don't know the numbers. It's hard to find the numbers because the manufacturers don't really readily provide the numbers, especially AudioQuest. It's easy to say, I think, that with respect to volume, both units provide great amplification. No doubt about it at all at 32 ohms. So typical headphones. You're not using something like the HD 800. You're not using the HD 600 or anything like that. That requires more impedance. And reasonable headphones you can get at 32 ohms. Some you can find at 16 ohms, 150 ohms max. I think both of these two units are going to be about equal in the volume output. It's clear that the Mojo has a bit more to it, right? We've got only 20% left to play with on the Cobalt, but the Mojo probably has another about 30% left of volume that it can ratchet up. That's a lot of volume. I have taken the Mojo to maximum volume before once, and I decided never to do it again because I almost died. Volume-wise, both of these are comparable, in my opinion. What about Soundstage? Well, Soundstage goes hand in hand with kind of detail retrieval. Depends on your taste. The Chord Mojo is simply a thicker, warmer, lusher sounding unit, whereas the Cobalt is leaner with more air and slightly better separation. And by slightly, it's slightly depending on you. You may not really like the separation. You may not like the airiness. Your headphones may not be able to actually translate that airiness accurately. The Allo Audio does in fact translate it. And I have to say, in my opinion, going back and forth, I would probably prefer the Cobalt over the Mojo for detail, like with New Light by Kazuki. That song was easily more enjoyable on the Cobalt than on the Mojo. On the piano-centric song, Flight from the City, it was a toss-up depending on how I felt. If I wanted a more intimate experience, the Mojo. If I wanted more airy experience, the Cobalt. And it's a really interesting comparison because you get two slightly different sound signatures, but comparable volumes. And the price, I mean, the Cobalt is at least $100 cheaper than the Mojo. And that's a good place to be. Now you've got some options. I hope this has been of some help. The next video, we are going to compare, in the next video, we are going to compare the bass response between these two devices. And let's find out from there on out how the mids respond, and then the video after that, how the treble response is on these two, and then finally an overall conclusion. I hope this video has been of some help to you if you're worried about choosing between these two units, or you're just curious, hey, is it possible that a USB DAC could possibly compete? I said possibly twice. Is it possible again? Can the USB DAC compete with the Mojo? And the answer seems to be, so far, yes. The baseline seems to be there. Volume's there, soundstage is there. Shoot, maybe the Cobalt's got something. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching. Once again, I'm on Patreon. If you would like to support me on Patreon, support my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks once again to all my subscribers. If you have any requests for reviews, please look at the description below. Click on the link to submit a review request. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, please leave them below. Thanks so much.